is an assistant professor for digital forensic linguistics at the Ruhr University Bochum. She works in computational linguistics, in particular on the detection of hate speech, harmful speech, analysis of and detection of disinformation, authorship in social media, and many other topics. And Veronika is a PhD student at Dahlem Center for Machine Learning and Robotics at Freie University. And she's working on various technical things, let's say sub-symbolic AI and like automated text analysis, adaptive feedback creation. And she's very interested in issues in the ethics of AI. So today we'll be talking about the Telegram Chronicle of Online Harm. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I should say that this talk is maybe a bit different from what we heard before today, but I think it will be very fruitful. At least I've enjoyed the previous presentations very much, and it's also very interdisciplinary work together with our host also, Mihaela Popa-Wyatt. So we should at least say your name. We started out kind of from the point that we wanted to look at harmful language online, and we started out from the point that there is actually no good consensual definition of what this actually is, especially if you get at it from different disciplines. So there's a lot of work on harmful language, both from linguistics, which is my background, from philosophy, also from the legal side, and from many other disciplines, but they often overlap in some ways, but there's not one thing that everybody agrees on, obviously. So in this talk that we're presenting here, we want to kind of start from an empirical basis, so bottom up, so to say, and look at one particular corpus where we expected a lot of harmful language to occur, and try to document the different types of harmful language that we can find there. And in particular, we're interested in not only in very direct types such as hate speech directly aimed at targets, but also at more indirect ways in which language can happen in these discourses and can be harmful. And so first we're going to present a kind of proposal for a taxonomy that was helpful for us for categorizing the harmful language that we found in this corpus. And then we're going to look at exactly the linguistic expressions used for this harmful language. So this is what our corpus allows us to do. And in this talk, we're going to, in particular, also look at automatic methods for detecting harmful language online, which are already in wide use in technology companies and also in social media that we talked about already today. And we're going to compare them, evaluate them, compare them with manual annotations, so with our human annotations of this harmful language. So we can say something about that later. Briefly, the structure of the talk is like that. I'm going to just really briefly show you the taxonomy that we used here, and without going into too much detail because we don't have that much time for it, but of course we're happy to discuss this afterwards in the discussion period. And then we're going to present, actually Veronika is going to present our data set that we collected from Telegram, which is special because this is kind of less a public for everyone kind of platform like Twitter, but more a closed community in a way. So we'll talk about that. And our empirical analysis, and we'll have some results and discussion in the end. So yeah, just a brief content warning. So we're using examples very sparingly, but there are a few examples of harmful language that are all from our corpus, so attested examples. Yeah, so just briefly the taxonomy. I also refrain to give examples for each of them, but basically we try to distinguish not only those kind of direct forms of harmful language or pejoratives from more indirect forms, but we're also basing this taxonomy on some work, for example, by Jeshion and others, who made a very, very important distinction between words that are inherent and expressions that are inherently pejorative. So this would be our class 2, pejorative words and expressions, as opposed to other types of words and expressions that may be used pejoratively, but may just be neutral in themselves, right? So they can also be used in other contexts without causing any harm. The first category is incendiary speech. So in particular, glorification of violence and dangerous speech. This will be important in our corpus, as will become clear in a minute when we talk about the community that we recorded there. And then in addition, we have 2 categories of more indirect forms of harmful language. So the in-out group class is used for divisive speech that users employ to kind of create a distinction between our in-group and some out-group. So this is not used to target anyone specifically, but still creates a kind of mindset that can cause harm by intensifying these distinctions. And in 5, we capture codes, so coded language that is also used in order to signify my identity, my belonging to this group of Trump supporters that we used in our corpus here. And there will be a few examples of these categories later, then it will become more clear. Oops. So let's go on to the corpus and our methods and annotations. Veronika, I think you'll take over.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, as you already understood, the data collection we gathered represents one public channel from basically encompassing, let's say, and justifying Donald Trump Jr.'s presidency through the prism of his supporters' conversations and the leading up, including the discussion of January 6th Capitol riot, and all this in the form of the public channel from Telegram platform. I would love to go to the next slide, please. So why Telegram? Basically, it is an encrypted mobile messaging platform, which is quite popular nowadays, especially as it is, let's say, an alternative to less secure messengers as WhatsApp in person-to-person communication. It also offers that private and public channels to one-to-many interactions, and it can be created by any user, and it's usually used to share information, kind of news, and also as discussion forums, let's say, as our corpus. So it also has that encryption feature, and that's why it attracted a lot of extremist groups, like, for example, ISIS, which has public channel and was just recently blocked basically 1 year ago. And interesting feature is that many channels are regularly deleted. So basically all posts are just purged. And interesting thing about our corpus is that it wasn't purged in the most intense period of 2020-2021. So next slide. In our research, we analyzed only one public channel, which was already quite a lot, and it attracts individuals with extreme right-wing views. And because it facilitates not only networking, but also potentially recruiting and mobilizing new members, as we witnessed reading the corpus, basically the members went gradually from discussion of governmental overthrow as a theoretical possibility to planning the January 6th 2021 riot, and also basically by sharing information on hotels and transportation in Washington, D.C., and also it finalized the discussion of the aftermath of the event. In next slide, I would like to show that some general statistics on the corpus. We have 26,000 messages, more or less, of this echo chamber, of only 521 distinct users. So it's only one of many channels which existed in this community. We scrapped it with, so basically collected it using official Telegram developer API and interface created for Python programming language, Telephone 1 package. We also gathered a lot of metadata, which can be interesting for our some other future research like date and time of post creation, message ID, user ID, the ID of the message it replied to, and attached media type. So we also provide multiple independent, automatic, and manual annotations of this corpus, and we'll talk about it in just in a minute. So now I would like to also show some interesting facts about our data to put it into perspective. So basically, the number of messages is not homogeneous throughout this 4.5 years of the presidency, and which is interesting. Our data set covers only 18 days of 2021, but it's the most active period anyway, with recording 15,000 messages out of 26,000. So this sudden spike in Telegram users suggests the possibility of migrating effects described in the literature and just in the news. So due to the, first of all, temporary closure of Parler, a ban on Reddit's subreddit, the Donald, and introduction of new Discord policies. So in 2021, in the next slide, we can see that it records the highest number of new users and the highest number of old users reviving their activity. It's a bit difficult to assess activity between 2016-2018 because basically we start only in December of 2016 when the channel was created, and in 2018 the channel had massive message deletion, which we talked before about, and that's why there is really no messages almost at all. And the interesting period is between 2019-2020. Because in 2018 there is more active, it is more active in number of messages, but less active in number of new users. But in 2020, a lot of new users start following the channel, although they don't write much. So there is this incrementing activity towards 2021. In next slide, I would like to show also that this increase in public discussion on topical issues is probably the real explanation behind this spikes in activity, because we can see some correlation between the spikes of messages and, for example, US government shutdown and the state of national emergency in order to secure funds for the southern border construction. Also, for example, on 27th of June of 2019, is an association with the subreddit Donald being quarantined by Reddit admins, which basically provoked a lot of outrage, and a lot of responses are also associated with the provocative tweets from the real Donald Trump account. So now, on the next slide, in 2020, we also can see that there is that increase in activity up to 2021, and there is a lot of discussion, especially after the election, and it is even more intense in the discussions related to Donald Trump's issuing pardons and commutations and tweeting about stolen elections. So during this period of 23rd of December, we also see the first evidence of planning an assembly on January 6, 2021. And next, we can see actually the January graphic, and the highest number of messages overall, 3,696, is actually on the not on the 6th, but on the 9th of January, which no, on the 7th, sorry. Yes, no, on the 9th. So because basically they are discussing the aftermath, not not during the event itself, and it is gradually decreasing to the usual average on the 16th. So now, as you saw a bit of how empirical data looks like, we can look at a bit of the annotations we made on the next slide. So first of all, talking about automatic annotations, we used two kinds of open source word lists by Anger 2017 and Shutterstock 2020. So how the idea of lists work is that we basically only we take the list of words and we compare them with the words we have in our messages. And if the message contains one of the words on the list, we basically flag this message as containing some problem. So the two lists I mentioned have one of them is focusing on detection of offensive language, and the other on detection of messages with higher risk of offensive language. They are both commonly used to detect different subtypes of harmful language in online contexts. Obviously, they only are useful to catch that explicit forms of harmful speech, especially pejorative words and expressions. However, one of our also goals was to show that although they are really used by a lot of administrators on social media, like moderators of these groups and channels, they have a lot of limitations. So basically, especially in detection of these implicit and creative forms of harmful language. So especially the second type of word list I mentioned, which is designed to detect the higher risk of offensive language. It contains not only offensive terms, but also neutral words occurring in contexts more prone to harmful uses, like so in some sexual discussions. And that's why these methods tend to create false positives when these target words occur in otherwise neutral conversations. And other problem is that they also can create, so yeah, as I said, they will not catch that implicit and creative forms. And the second automatic annotation is done with hate speech offensive language detection library, HateSoma, by Nakayama 2017. It is a method trained with neural networks and contextual embeddings, which is one of the newest automated tools available. And which is different is that it basically is supposed to catch that context on both directions from the possible words. They assign labels hate speech, offensive, and neutral to the input text. So as last thing I would love to conclude with is that first interesting finding in the very beginning is that this annotation by neural network and word lists never coincide. So they didn't overlap even once. So this was our starting point. And we can continue with Tatjana.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oops, here I am. Thank you very much. Yeah, exactly. So we applied these two automatic methods to just see how they can fare on this kind of corpus, because they're actually often used exactly on this type of data. And we're interested in the linguistic expressions of behind harmful language and how we can identify them. So just for the statistics, as Veronika said, these different automatic methods never coincide. So if we look again at our corpus data, then throughout the whole corpus, about 80%, a bit more, of the messages are not flagged by any of these types of methods. So neither the word lists, which you can see in the purple at the very top here, nor the neural network automatic classifier, which can take into account a little bit of the message context and has these two labels, hate speech and offensive language, right? So 80% is kind of considered not harmful by these automatic methods, and these other ones are flagged. So we wanted to see how good are these methods, and where do we basically need to still spend also some linguistic research and computational linguistic research in identifying harmful language. So in addition, we performed a manual annotation, actually Veronika did it, of not the whole corpus because it's too much, but about 1/5 of the data 4,500 messages from the kind of hot time during the November 2020 to January 21. So the most active time of the corpus. And we found, so we annotated this not only on the message basis, so this message contains some harmful language, but even the individual expressions that were considered harmful according to our taxonomy that I presented initially. And we found about, we found 787 messages that contain harmful language, and some of them even contain several instances. So that's why there's a higher number of instances here. And if we just look at the distribution according to the 5 major taxonomy categories that I introduced initially, then we found mainly pejorative words and expressions. That's our category 2 among these 787 messages, and also the codes. So I will show some examples of codes in a minute. But we also frequently find words or expressions that are used offensively or in a harmful way, but aren't themselves harmful, and incendiary language, glorifying violence. This is in particular in the lead up to this to these riots. And we also found a smaller number of these in-out group expressions. And just for the ones that know about this kind of empirical annotation, we also had another linguist re-annotate independently a subset of these messages to see whether, you know, one can reliably distinguish between these 5 categories, and found quite substantial inter-annotator agreement. So to indicate that these categories can be distinguished by humans relatively reliably. I think in the interest of time, I may go over this quickly. This is just a brief split of within the 2 categories that have many subtypes. So the pejorative words and expressions have many subtypes in our taxonomy that I briefly showed on the first slide. And so we can also distinguish there, quantify which of those types of expressions are more frequent in our corpus. So for example, the pejorative words used pejoratively, that's this pink block, they're the most frequent amongst them. And amongst the insulting, offensive, and abusive uses, we have the green one, which is non-pejorative words used pejoratively, something like boy, used pejoratively. These are the most frequent ones. So that's just the split up. So now in the second talk, so now having introduced this data set and kind of what we did with it, I want to talk about this comparison between the automatic annotation and the manual annotation on the other hand, so that we can basically evaluate these type of automatic methods. And the first confusion matrix that's shown here just looks at whether in one Telegram message some kind of harmful language was flagged, either by the automatic methods. They are here on the horizontal, on the x-axis. So one is for yes, they found some harmful language, and 0 is they did not find any. And then on the y-axis, on the vertical, we have the manual annotations. And of course, as we said, most of the messages are actually not containing any harmful language. So there's some substantial agreement there also. And there are also 275 messages where both the human as well as the automatic method identified some problem, but there's also significant disagreement here. So we can see really that there's still quite a lot of way to go in order to detect this kind of harmful language. So both with whether with a word list or with an automatic classifier, a trained algorithm. So I've split this up now into a more detailed table. I hope I can walk you through it so that it's really clear. This is now lists, again on the horizontal, the manual annotation, but now split up into the individual categories of harmful language that we define so that we can see which ones are more easy or more hard to detect. Okay, and on the horizontal, you see now the different automatic methods that we used. So the word lists, they're kind of combined here because they, as we said, they don't overlap. Then the hate sonar, which is the neural network algorithm, which assigns two harmful categories, namely hate speech and offensive language. And then there was, of course, the messages that weren't flagged by anything and that were neutral. So if we just look in this direction at first, we can see that the recall in this last column shows how many of the messages that actually belong into each of those categories, according to our manual annotation, were found by any of the automatic methods. And it can be seen that in particular, so the easiest to identify are the pejorative words and expressions, which is clear, right? Because they are kind of tied to some part of the lexicon. But even for them, only 60% can be found. So this shows that maybe these word lists, like now that they're used on a different community and a different type of data in Telegram, still cannot find all the pejoratives that these people might come up with, right? But in addition, we can see that in particular, the codes and also the incendiary language that glorifies violence or that is dangerous speech is very hard to identify by current methods, because we need more context to find it. And in the other direction, in this bottom row, we can see the precision of each of these methods. This shows just of all the messages that were flagged, so to say, as potentially harmful by these methods, how many were actually found to be harmful by the human annotation, so to contain some harmful language. And we can see that also the precision is pretty low, in particular for the word lists and also for this category of offensive language by the neural network algorithm. This is because, as Veronika said before, the word lists also contain many words that aren't actually necessarily used in a harmful way, right? So they might just use some neutral word, contain some neutral word like sex or something, and then it always gets flagged. That's obviously not very precise. Okay, so if we try to summarize this evaluation, then well, the first takeaway is, well, fully automatic detection is clearly still quite far away. But even if these methods are used kind of for flagging messages for potential moderation, or if someone were to use these kind of methods to try and find potentially harmful language to study it, I think it's not quite good enough yet, right? Because they, in addition to flagging things that aren't actually harmful, they also miss a lot of the messages that actually are harmful according to our definitions, but that cannot be found without more context, so to say, and more understanding. So both of these automatic methods that we used kind of make very heavy use of lexical items and have difficulties integrating context. So yeah, on the one hand, many bad words are used in very legitimate contexts as well, as I said, but also code and incendiary speech are quite frequent in our data, but apparently very hard to detect. And I just gave you a couple examples from our corpus here, that I think shows why you know, a machine might have trouble in trying to find this, right? You really need to have the whole context of the conversation to understand maybe the harm in these kind of expressions, as violence is 100,000% justified now. And the codes in our corpus are things that words that take on a very specific meaning in this community that signals all kinds of things, but that uses just very common words like "give that man a brick." So, however, we do believe that this corpus, because this data is available, we're making it available. It gives us an opportunity to investigate now these cases where the automatic and manual annotations still differ. So as a linguist, I'm interested in, okay, in the case that the automatic method says it's harmful, but it really isn't, then maybe these are some reappropriations, or maybe I need to know more context to understand why this word is actually, expression is actually not bad. On the other hand, if the automatic method doesn't see any problem, but really we say it is harmful, then these might be exactly the kind of more complex cases of harmful language that are interesting to discuss. There might be some subjectivity that comes in, and again, some additional context. Okay, so I got the gong, but I think I have a few more minutes for the very last part. Which is an exploratory analysis, so to say. So we wanted to study, because these are people within one community, right? As Veronika showed, there's actually not that many people, and they talk with each other over a long time period, right? So we thought, can this type of data also be used to study questions like, does harmful speech cause more harmful speech or lead to more harmful speech, right? Do these people kind of intensify their language over time or something like that? So we did only one very little analysis so far, which is just to look at if we have a message and a response to it, how does kind of the probability of the response containing harmful language depend on the previous message, right? So here on the right, you have this kind of in graph form. So the initial message up here, it could be neutral. And actually most pairs of messages of message and response in our corpus are, you know, both messages are neutral, not harmful. There's a small number of harmful messages that are also followed by harmful messages, but you can see that actually if you have a harmful language, the chance that it's being also followed by a harmful language is much higher than if you have a neutral language. So in fact, if you do this math, this is shown on the left with these probabilities, these are from the empirical data. So given that I have a neutral message, the chance that I'm getting a harmful response is only 2.3%, and the chance is increased more than 10 times if the initial message also contained harmful language. Okay, then I'm more than a quarter. In more than a quarter of the cases, the response also contains harmful language. So this, of course, does not in itself show a causal relationship yet, but at least it shows that these harmful messages cluster together. And we believe that it indicates that we can use this type of data to study whether harmful language creates an environment for more harmful speech, right? Or that kind of incites and intensifies the discussion. And it would be consistent definitely with the topic of this forum where they planned this riot and then discuss the riot. This is kind of the end of our presentation. We constructed a new corpus of messages from a Telegram channel that we expected to contain a relatively large number of harmful speech. This corpus includes discussion in preparation for and following this January riots. And then we applied both some automatic methods for detecting certain subtypes of harmful language to this corpus, as well as manual annotation according to a taxonomy that we devised based on the empirical data. And yes, the importance, we think, of this corpus is also that it's a conversation within an in-group community, right? So these people are not directly attacking outsiders, because outsiders are not even in this channel, right? They're just talking within their own community. So there's an opportunity there to look at what this type of harmful language looks like that is more indirect in a way. They're very difficult to detect, but we believe can lead to environments where online harm can become the norm, and we would like to study this and how to mitigate it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tatjana and Veronika. So the floor is open for discussion. So you can put your Q question in the chat. Am I saying the entire? Let's see. Okay, a question from Kevin.
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot. I was really interested in particular in the last slide, so that's what I was going to ask about, which is, you know, there are a couple, I mean, hateful message can cause another hateful message via a bunch of different mechanisms. And I've wondered if you've looked at, is it that people that are more prone to use this kind of speech tend to cluster together the people, or is it that the messages tend to cluster? That is, you know, you might imagine that I, say, am a particularly high user of hate speech, and so I just use it all the time, but it just turns out that I tend to interact more frequently with other people who use more hate speech. Or is it that I modulate my speech depending on the content of the person I'm interacting with? Because both seem plausible, and so it's not that I think that one or the other is the right one, but I'd actually be curious to know if one of those other mechanisms is sort of more operative or something.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great question. I think, so the answer is we haven't looked at this in this corpus, but I think we could, because we do have the user IDs. And I know of some studies in some other networks, so in Reddit in particular, where certain channels were closed because of too much hate going on there. And then computational linguists studied when those users migrated to other channels, whether they basically took this language with them or not. And what they found is that, well, some users just kind of stopped using the platforms, but the others, I think if I remember correctly, they did adapt to the tone of the new channel. So they didn't, you know, they weren't just, there was at least a group of people who you know, behaved in this way in this one channel, but then when they switched to a different audience or a different group, or however you want to think of it, then they behave differently. So, but it would be very interesting to look at here too, because even Reddit, I think, is way more public, at least seen by the users, than something like Telegram, where we're really organizing our activism somehow. Yeah. Thank you.
Next question is from Stefan and then Christoph.
Thanks. Yeah, very interesting talk. The one question I have is about the prevalence of this. I mean, it sounded to me really as though the problem is actually relatively small if I look at the absolute numbers of these messages being exchanged. Now, that's not to say they aren't harmful if you scale it up, but I'm just wondering, do you have any sense of whether you're looking sort of at the tip of the iceberg here, or like if you like what's the total volume out there, that including the stuff you haven't looked at? How prevalent is this hate speech? Do you have any guess?
I don't know, Veronika, do you want to say something about it?
Yeah.
Because you read the whole corpus. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can just say from my view, just briefly, one sentence maybe, that even though only 15% of the messages got this harmful flags, the rest was also quite offensive to read. Like if you actually read it, right? So to me, as someone who's not in that community, I mean, there's most outrageous things, but they do not fall into a clear, pejorative expression or something like that. But maybe Veronika can say more about how much is out there. And
yeah, I would say that we basically chose this little period to annotate intentionally to capture a little bit that the aftermath and the planning of the riot. But then I was searching for some examples. Even for the slides, I just randomly opened any part of the corpus, and it was like, and it was not part of the annotated portion. It was immediately like a lot of hate speech, a lot of the discussions of how the probability of creating an enlightened dictatorship with Trump, something like this. So basically, they also, as far as I remember, discussed that the moderator of this particular channel, had another 3 channels of bigger size, but they obviously didn't have any links. So they want to, as far as I understand, they constantly are trying to be actually quite, let's say, not obviously, not to use hate speech, obviously, because they think that federal agents are reading their channels and they're usually trying to find people and point them out that you are a federal agent. So basically, even this channel had 3 sister channels. So we can totally say that this channel is like kind of an example of larger problem.
Right. So next question from Christoph.
Yeah. My question would have been sort of in the same direction as Veronika just explained. Like, how aware are these users, or were these users, that Telegram, being an encrypted messenger app and being advertised as such, that their messages wouldn't be private but like accessible through an API and stuff like that, like with the privacy concerns, and is the government reading it, and a lot of people switching platforms and messengers for privacy reasons. Obviously that would affect the use of non-pejorative words as a substitute for slurs and stuff.
I probably will answer again. So the idea is that a lot of times then someone was really expressing some very direct glorification of violence, let's say saying something like Hitler was right. They were basically many other users were saying like, you are federal agents, you are trying to provoke us. We will not follow this lead. We are actually like not supporting this kind of ideology, but just, let's say, a day after, they are discussing rather similar things and they are okay with it. So it's actually difficult to say. Obviously, they are very much aware that, let's say, FBI can, federal agencies can follow them, but at the same time, they still feel this anonymity. And that's why I think nothing prevents them from even discussing the place where we will meet to get together, like on BlaBlaCar or something like this, to get to Washington DC.
So they're most suspicious of like new random people in the discussion.
Yeah, they will.
Is there on Telegram? I'm not using it that much. For those channels, do they have like people being moderators, or how does that work? So do they have people who sort of look at stuff and say, oh, this person is kind of behaving suspiciously, it might be like a federal agent trying to infiltrate us, or is it sort of just a consensus that people arrive at? So like Discord has moderators, and Twitch has moderators. So a lot of these platforms have users given them special privileges. Does Telegram have that for those channels?
Yes, they have, but they are usually kind of the same. So they are the creators, and they will be of the same kind of use. But sometimes they are appealing to the moderators, like to block some people, especially if I obviously saw some trolls, for example, which infiltrated from Reddit and were really just trying to, again, write something provocative or just make fun of them. And these kind of people were just blocked after really quickly.
And other moderators like sort of cautioning real users of this group to sort of watch their words and be careful what they say, or
no, they will block rather democratically viewed people, or as I said, trolls, but otherwise they will. I haven't seen any, at least, evidence of
interesting,
trying to classify them.
Right. Next question is from Luciane.
Hi, great talk. I wonder if you have shown it, and I might have missed it. Did you have the percentage of figurative language use in your data?
No, we don't have that.
Metaphors.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Actually, we do have some subtypes, right, that are creative language use and figurative language. Let me see if that's in the.
I know you mentioned the use of metaphors.
Yeah, I do have. Okay, so I will maybe share that slide again. So we have a particular, this slide. So in this slide, it was way too quick. I couldn't show everything. But if you look here, insulting metaphors is this brownish part here. So there's no numbers here, but the numbers are not very high. So if they're fall into this category, then they would be here. So this would be part of an expression that is in itself maybe not pejorative, but is used in an insulting or offensive way. So that would be this color here. But there's also other kind of creative uses like jokes and other ones. Some of them may also contain figurative language. So I wouldn't say that all the figurative language is only in there. Even some of the codes are probably figurative, you know, like give that man a brick, or I don't know. I mean, so if you really analyze them linguistically, they're probably also figurative. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Demo rats, the sort of inventive collocation.
California.
Okay.
California, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. So next question is from Alessandra.
Hi, thank you. Really interesting. So my question is about sort of the broad framework, right? So I take that one of the reasons why pursuing this kind of work is interesting is that if we can automate this categorization, then we can deal with the problem of moderation on some platforms, right? So it would be useful to be able to do this sort of work, say, for Facebook or whatever, because at the moment there are people who do this stuff partially manually. I mean, there are moderators and they have terrible working conditions and serious mental health issues, right? Because of what they have to sort of see all the time. So I was wondering whether, given the law certainly in the States, but also in European countries, some of the stuff that you have classified as harmful would be nevertheless protected speech, right? So certainly not in incendiary speech or incitement to violence, and not hate speech. But some of the speech that you categorize as harmful would not fall under speech that can be proscribed. Not, I think, in even in European laws, they are more sort of strict when it comes to what speech can be proscribed. So I wonder whether the chances, whether you have thought about whether once you have this narrower categorization of what counts as harmful speech, whether the prospects for automatizations are sort of closer, whether you think it might be easier to automize that sort of speech. You see what I mean? I think you're capturing a larger, right? So some of your harmful speech is actually protected free speech, right? So once you narrow it down, is automatization, the prospects of automatization, you know, more positive, more rosy?
Yeah, I'm actually doubtful. So I understand what you mean, right? So obviously not all of these fall under the legal definition of hate speech in any country. But I don't think that even if you only took the ones that do, that they fall, that they would be much easier to automatize because of these creative uses of language that depend very much on the context and also on the intention of the speaker, so to say, right? What why did I call you that, or something like that. In addition, I had another thought, but now it slipped my mind. So I think it will not be a lot easier to automatize that. Oh, the other thing was that I think the usefulness is not only in detecting it for filtering or for moderation, but there's also other practical responses to this type of language that, you know, fall short of deleting messages, right? So also in the case, of course, also in the case of disinformation, right, it's been shown that it's maybe not the best solution to just delete it, but also in the case of this kind of harmful language, there's been some quite neat experiments also with social media of, for example, responding to such language and saying, you know, what you just said is, you know, is offensive or is harmful, and that people actually react to that and change their behavior. So this maybe gives back some of this missing context that I think you mentioned in your talk, right? That can lead to so this decontextualized situation in social media that can lead to kind of this type of language. There are potentially methods, if you could find out who these people are who post a lot of harmful language of all types, and you can respond to them, then maybe they would also change their behavior, right? So there's, I think, also a good purpose in trying to find the linguistic characterizations and also find automatic ways of identifying harmful language, even that is not just hate speech. Yeah.
And like, if I may, I think indeed, I mean, our purpose in a way by providing this broader taxonomy was to basically look at ways that would go beyond the legal definitions of hate speech, that would be protected speech. So even though, like, yeah, Facebook has like a 3-tier way of kind of tackling what one would count as hate speech, you know, the dehumanizing, the statements of inferiority, and I think also they look at exclusionary type of speech that would try to segregate kind of groups. But I think our purpose was in a way to look at even this kind of, yeah, harmful uses of language that basically seek to poison the discourse, to sort of lower the acceptability boundaries and kind of make it as if like, this is the new normal, hey, go on, and just and then just by kind of creating this mindset that they sort of, in a way, yeah, reinforce one another. So that kind of comes back to Kevin's point in a way. Is it a matter of the message? Is it like the catchiness of the message that kind of gives them, you know, and also resonates with them, and it's also kind of a preference for this sort of, basically, as you were saying, sort of angry angry message and everything that kind of unleashes outrage and just goes at the end of the overturned window. That seems to be something that kind of resonates with their predispositions, and that kind of makes them even more to go overtly. So, but yeah, the legal questions are really kind of hard to tackle, and in a way, it wasn't our purpose. It was more to sort of precisely increase that type of language. Yeah, not very good response to your worry. I see actually a remark by Jenny. So a lot of legal hate speech definitions are super contextual. Yeah, in a way, I don't know. I'm only recently kind of realized that in the legal question there is an emphasis on the precisely on the lack of context that they that previous work was going on.
Yep.
Yeah, but clearly in a way that's the problem why it's hard to automate. Yeah, and also yeah, I guess the lack of the difficulty of assessing intention or
yeah, in fact, I mean, I have colleagues in law. I mean, now in this digital forensic linguistics job, I collaborate with law scientists, and they actually talk about this, right? I mean, for them, the harm has to have happened in order to, especially in Strafrecht, so in criminal law, right? The crime has to have occurred and has to have had some harmful effect for it to be relevant. So that is quite difficult to assess, I'm sure, automatically. So just from the linguistic parts of the text, right? So yeah.
I would maybe add a little example from our corpus to this kind of situation. Then people were saying that as an example, everyone doing abortions have to be burnt alive, and then the next message is saying amen to that. So in itself, we will never, and any automatic library would find it, but it obviously is some kind of glorification of violence, and that's why we really are far away from automizing this kind of tools.
Oh,
Okay.
if there are no other questions, I think we've been okay. Alexandra, please.
Actually, in response to that, I mean, I don't know this stuff, but I have friends here in linguistics. I work in a department that is philosophy and linguistics, who work on corpus linguisticus sort of approaches to, and what they are interested. I mean, one of the things they automize is they look at clusters of words. So the view there is you look out. Certain words tend to appear together in certain contexts. So in that, presumably, you could have something that looks at whether the use of the word amen or whatever is sort of in proximity, right, of a certain kind of word. So couldn't you look at the way in which if there are certain clusters of words that tend to appear together and use the clustering as an indication? I know that they do this to try to understand certain forms of emotional language. So they don't just look at emotional words, but they also look at how words tend to appear in proximity.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly the method, the second method, this hate sonar. So this automatic classifier is using exactly these type of methods. But as you can see, it's still not useful in a general sense, right? So this hate speech category of hate sonar, that was the one that had the highest precision. So at least for the few cases where it said, yes, here I've detected hate speech, that was most likely to be correct, but it just missed a lot of other cases, even a lot of the pejoratives, for example, and clear slurs. So The language, at least in this corpus, it's just more creative than such a system might expect still. So yeah, that's our job, so to say, in computational linguistics.
Right, so I think I see no other questions. So thank you again, Tatjana and Veronika, for a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
And we reconvene in 10 minutes almost with Kevin's talk.